should we really be celebrating Winston Churchill?
Well, joining us now to debate Churchill's legacy is historian and former board member of the International Churchill Society, Rafe Heydel-Mankoo, and political commentator Femi Nylander. Very good to see you both this morning. And Rafe, let's start with you. And you are a big Winston Churchill fan. Why should we be celebrating him?
Yes, you may be able to see his bust over my shoulder here. Look, I say, bravo to the Royal Mint for actually supporting what most British people support. Remember in 2002, Churchill was voted the greatest Briton of all time. He's been the greatest inspiration in my own life, and I just hope that things like this help to inspire future generations. That's why I've called for a long time for the early May bank holiday to be renamed Sir Winston Churchill Day, for us to actually celebrate, like the Americans have a Martin Luther King Jr. Day, a chance for us to celebrate the greatest wartime leader in British history. And that's not a right-wing argument. Clement Attlee, the great socialist prime minister, Labour's finest prime minister, also said that the whole world owes Churchill a huge debt. There are very few times in history when that expression, cometh the hour, cometh the man, is more apt. And it's hard, I would say, perhaps impossible to think of another occasion in world history when the future of Europe and the free world rested briefly upon one man's shoulder for 1 year, from Dunkirk and the fall of France in May-June 1940 until Hitler invaded Russia in 1941. Britain alone was standing against Hitler, and if Hitler had beaten Britain, he would have controlled Europe and would have been able to focus 100% of his forces against Russia rather than just 70%. And as Stalin acknowledged, and Khrushchev, if Germany had gone to war against Russia alone, he would have defeated Russia, and the world today would look very different.
Yeah, it certainly would. Look, in the face of that, Femi, it's difficult to argue against commemorating Sir Winston, isn't it?
Well, I do have some faith in the British people, the human beings, but what I do think has been done to the British people generally is a miseducation in many ways, because you're taught selectively. We're taught only certain things. We're taught about Churchill's role, and he wasn't a one-man army, as Rafe seems to imply. There were plenty of soldiers, and there were plenty of other countries involved in the war. However, we're taught all of that, great. But what we should also be taught, and usually I'd start talking about the Bengal famine, which I believe is Churchill's biggest crime in India. But today I'd want to talk about a different one because it's more relevant at the moment. When the initial idea of the ethnic cleansing of Palestine, which is leading to the murder of children today, was taking place, Churchill is on record as having said, and may I be very clear, this is a very, very, very blatant endorsement of the idea of ethnic cleansing and racial genocide. I do not admit that the dog in the manger has the final right to the manger, even though he may have lain there for a very long time. I do not think a great wrong has been done to the Red Indians of America or the black people of Australia by their replacement with a higher grade race. So here he is being very clear that what Churchill believes, while he preaches about freedom and equality in Europe, and while he fights the Nazis, who were thugs in their own right, he is being very clear that he believes that white Europeans are a higher grade race than Arabs and than black Aboriginal Australians and American indigenous people, and it's fine to go there and take their land and massacre them or drive them out in order to do so. And that has very real repercussions today in the murder of 20,000 Palestinians. And it's not just to say that Churchill was a man of his time, because in the same parliamentary debate in 1948, when the NABCO was taking place, Bevin, British Foreign Secretary Ernest Bevin, said, with reference to the Palestinians, the driving of poor innocent people from their homes, whether it is in Germany by Hitler or by anyone else, is a crime. And we really ought to join together to stop it if we can. That's the British Foreign Secretary of the time. So not all people were united in their views that this is fine. So one example.
Okay, you've raised some really valid points there. You've raised some really valid points. Let's get Rafe to respond to that.
Yeah, well, the first thing to know is that when Churchill speaks about race, he's actually speaking about nations. So he speaks about the French race, the British race, the German race. You know, his abridged version of his History of the English-speaking Peoples is called the Island Race. So it's very dangerous to actually try to use modern concepts of race and racism and apply them to a person who was born in the Victorian era, born in 1874, 150 years ago now, a man who had a very different... And Churchill was not a racist in any sense. You know who was a racist? Karl Marx and Engels, those great champions of the left. Somehow they're never cancelled. Even, you know, Gandhi called that South Africans, blacks were living like animals. You had Beatrice Webb, the great socialist icon, also using the N-word frequently and other nasty words about Chinese and so forth. There were certain things that were said at the time. What's amazing about Churchill is he never used racial epithets. In all of the 2 million words he wrote, in all of his private correspondence and letters, never once did he ever use the N-word, for example, whereas it was used in common parlance, including by Bevan, including by Leo Amery, another critic of his. What's remarkable is that Churchill had a paternalistic attitude. So Churchill actually fought against American segregation policy in Britain during World War II. He said that we will not be party to what the American troops were doing in segregating their troops, that black American soldiers had equal rights of access to canteens, cinemas, theatres and restaurants in this country. It was Churchill who actually said that blacks in Africa should have equal rights. Gandhi praised him for fighting for Indian rights in South Africa. And it was Churchill who actually helped to end slavery in Sudan. This man has a great long list of things that he did. He spoke with a paternalistic attitude because in his attitude, in his mindset, Europe and Britain were far more advanced and developed than these other parts of the world. When he says that he's not going to apologize for it, it was because he genuinely thought that that the West was improving the lot of people around the world who didn't have access to medicine and healthcare or education or modern sanitation and so forth. So we can't use the arguments of today when we're looking at a very different historical world of the past. Okay. And I think, you know, we should educate himself a bit more about this topic.
Well, look, I think we all need to be educated on both sides about all of this, I think. Look, Rafe, Femi, really good to see you both. Thank you for your thoughts.
May I just reply to that? Because he got
if you can do it in 30 seconds.
Quickly. Sure. I just want to repeat the quote, and then you can decide whether or not this is about nations or races. No great wrong has been done to the red Indians of America or the black people of Australia by their replacement of a higher... Rafe, you spoke a long time. Rafi, you spoke a long time. By a higher grade race. He's obviously talking about the ethnic displacement of people who are red or black by people who are white. Nothing to do with nations.
Do some more research. Rather than quoting out of context, do some more research into the broader picture and you'll realise that's not what he's saying.
The quote speaks for itself. The quote speaks for itself.
Well, okay. I'm afraid we are out of time. Rafe Heydel-Mankoo, thank you very much. And Femi Nylander, good to see you both this morning. And do get your views in on that. GBviews@gbnews.com.